Hey everybody, it's Alita. In light of Nintendo releasing a brand new Animal Crossing game this month, I figured I'd hop up in front of my microphone and talk a little bit about the series, the community, and my experiences with it, which is something that absolutely nobody asked for, but that I wanted to do anyway. The series has something special that clearly resonates with so many players, but since I only have my own experiences to go off of, let's start there. I began playing Animal Crossing when I was young. Like, really young. Like, so young that I didn't know what military time was or how it worked, and I accidentally set my in game time to 4 in the morning instead of 4 in the afternoon, and I didn't understand why it was dark in my town and why nobody was awake, which is really bold of me considering I struggle to wake up before 8 a.m. I'm happy to say that the game no longer uses a system of time telling, but I unfortunately grew up to be someone who insists on using military time on their phone, despite living in the United States, which is super inconvenient to everyone around me. Animal Crossing Population Growing was released in the United States for the GameCube all the way back in 2001. I happened upon it while browsing the games section of my local Target, and all I can remember was staring at the cover art for a disturbing amount of time, almost like I was being possessed. I didn't know it at the time, but the demon that possessed my body in that moment would have a grip on my soul for the next 15 plus years. I'd really only played combat style games up until that point, and I'd wrongly assumed that this game would be no different. I assume if you clicked on this video, you know quite a bit about the series, but because I like to hear the sound of my own voice, let's refresh. Animal Crossing's first title begins with you, the protagonist, sitting on a train embarking to your new town. This scene is shot in first person, and before long, a cat named Rover takes a seat across from you and begins talking. Your answers to his questions determine what your villager looks like, and if you're like me, you reset the game a million times because your villager came out looking straight up busted, and you aren't about to play a whole game looking like that. At the close of the conversation, Rover reminds you, remember, things are never as bad as they seem, and wishes you luck. That's great advice that I'll never listen to. You then arrive in town and are immediately sent to work in Tom Nook's store, which works as a sort of tutorial for the game, and at the end, you sign into a mortgage. And really quick, I would like to specify that I don't want to see any Tom Nook slander in these comments because he does not charge interest or a monthly minimum, and also he's very cute, and if anybody has anything negative to say about him, please leave your address in the comments below. These hands, like Animal Crossing, are rated E for everyone. Wild World for the Nintendo DS, which was released in 2005, received much more critical success with around 11.75 million copies sold, as compared to Population Growing's measly 2.32. It had a bunch of new features, but the thing that made Wild World so special at the time was its ability to connect, and I don't just mean in a metaphorical sense. Connecting and traveling to other towns in Population Growing was a tedious process, and while I didn't have any friends growing up whose towns I could visit, or otherwise, visiting a town merely meant visiting the town, not the player. There just wasn't an option for multiplayer in that iteration. Wild World, however, introduced a feature that made the game more social in that you could now play with your friends, and by just bugging your dad for the unnecessarily complicated Wi-Fi password, you were pretty much set. This was the first game that most of my female classmates were really playing too, and video games were something that I really didn't get to bond with my friends that were girls on. And I don't mean that in a look at me, I'm so edgy, I'm not like other girls kind of way. Video games have always been something that were really important to me, but they were something that I couldn't necessarily share with the girls in my class. And that's not to say that I didn't have female friends. I had almost exclusively female friends when I was a kid, because we connected on other things. But I think there's something about video games that connect people in a different way, and I felt like I missed out on that. Until Wild World. Getting to have playdates where we were doing something that I loved so much was different for me, and it made me feel not so alone in my interests. Something I've noticed that ties the Animal Crossing community together is a familiarity with the feeling of being lonely, which makes sense when you take its creator and its inception into account. On the topic of Animal Crossing, its creator, Katsuya Eguchi, said, "The reason I wanted to investigate the themes of family, friendship, and community was a result of being so lonely when I arrived in Kyoto. Chiba is east of Tokyo and quite a distance from Kyoto, and when I moved there, I left my family and friends behind. In doing so, I realized that being close to them, being able to spend time with them, talk to them, play with them, was such a great, important thing. I'd wondered for a long time if there would be a way to recreate that feeling, and that was the impetus behind the original Animal Crossing. And I think that feeling translates well, even through New Leaf, despite the fact that the series no longer has the charm that comes with simplicity. Each Animal Crossing game seems to truly encapsulate what it's like moving away from everything you know and having to make new friends in an unfamiliar place. And I began playing Animal Crossing New Leaf at the perfect time. For some background, I've always had a really close relationship with my family, and being away from them for any extended period had a profound effect on me, and going away to college was that, but on steroids. Yeah, I'll admit it, I'm a huge baby. After my parents helped move me in my freshman year, I remember saying goodbye to them and watching the door close as they walked away, sitting down in my bed, and then just crying uncontrollably. From that point on, I would cry for a minimum of 2 hours a day for the first 2 years. Based on the way I'm talking right now, you might be thinking I moved halfway across the country. Nope. Maybe 5 hours away? Still no. I moved 1 hour away from my parents. I was so determined to make things work at school. I promised myself I wouldn't go home for at least a month, and I stuck to that. But with each passing day, I felt more and more isolated. I made friends at school quickly. Okay, you can't see me right now, but I'm doing air quotes. Friends! What I mean is that I had people to eat dinner with, and who would air me out when I locked myself in my bedroom for too many days at a time. And listen, I know my family was only an hour away or a phone call away or whatever, but without having them there to vibe check me all the time, it was really easy to fall off the wagon with my mental health. In many ways, I felt like I'd been cut off from them, and after feeling isolated for so long, I became understandably very, very sad. I was tired, I didn't feel well, and I didn't want to do, well, anything. I went home in November for Thanksgiving break and I felt a little better, but I was dreading going back to school. After Thanksgiving, and thanks to a Black Friday deal at Target, are you noticing a theme? I was able to get my dirty little paws on a 3DS and Animal Crossing New Leaf, which had already been out for a few years at this point. I told myself I wasn't going to start playing until I went back to school, and I did just that. I still remember booting it up for the first time while lying on my tiny twin XL bed in my even tinier college dorm. The game begins with Rover the cat once again sitting across from a player on the train and just talking to them. This intro mirrored the start of the very first Animal Crossing game I'd played 15 years prior and felt, in a weird way, like I was back in my childhood bedroom sitting a little bit too close to a tiny box TV and having my mom yell about how I was going to go blind. Animal Crossing is something that's really easy to get invested in. There aren't any checkpoints, no real obstacles, no pressure, and you can choose to do absolutely nothing if you so wish. What you get out of Animal Crossing is what you put into it, which is true of our real lives too. And when you do put effort into it, you can create a town that's really amazing. And I spent a lot of my time doing just that. I'm not saying that virtual accomplishments are a suitable replacement or that running through all of Kiki's dialogue options is equal to human interaction. I think it can be really easy to fall into a video game addiction, which stems from a need to get that hit of a sense of accomplishment. But for people who fall ill the way that I did, Animal Crossing has its merits. Animal Crossing is a life simulator. At the risk of being executed, dare I say it's not a particularly exciting game compared to some other titles. As we get new information about New Horizons with its release of March 20th, 2020, people are excited about the way the leaves on the trees look and the way that the wind rustles them. It's clear that the fans aren't there for the action. I didn't have much of a life outside of Animal Crossing at the time, but I don't think I would have had much of one if I didn't have the game either. At the end of the day or on weekends when I didn't have the energy to hang out with friends, I was able to open up my 3DS and see some friendly faces, and that sounds so pathetic when I say it out loud, but despite being unable to muster up the energy to clean my room in real life, or do really much of anything, I was able to find a sense of accomplishment in my virtual one. Seeing my own life emulated back to me, albeit much cuter, gave me something to hold on to, and it allowed me to feel my loneliness and reframe it as something that wouldn't last forever. Animal Crossing was, to me, drinking a cup of hot chocolate under a fuzzy blanket during a particularly nasty thunderstorm, and it allowed me to view that period of my life as a season rather than a forever. The Animal Crossing series exemplifies taking joy in the mundane parts of life because our lives truly aren't one big thing but a series of a million smaller things. It allows the player to form a routine, and for people who are very, very sad, this can be beneficial. The Animal Crossing series is gearing up to add a new addition to its lineup, and presently, I'm preparing to move out of my childhood home yet again, and a move that will take me away from my family. And there's a chance that maybe I will become very, very sad again, but I just have to remember, nothing is as bad as it seems. If you like this video, please consider subscribing or give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, leave me some critiques for what I could do better next time. Either way, thanks so much for watching, and hopefully there's a next one. Stay tuned. Okay, bye. Oh shit, I totally forgot to talk about Animal Crossing City Folk.